cop killer freak. Pow, pow, pow. So this is a bit of a follow-on from the last one. And just to clear a couple of things up, when I said if you join the army, I meant the forces really. And that's not all. I mean, cop killer freak, pow, pow, pow. How many of those are ever prosecuted for shooting people in cold blood? And many of them unarmed. A guy with a chair leg, was it, in this country? Or table leg, shot. A man with a white stick, a blind man, was tasered. He wasn't killed, but I mean, that's bad enough, isn't it? Obviously not as bad as being shot and killed, but bloody hell. Anyway, accidents do happen, mistakes are made, but legitimise the breaking of the Ten Commandments. It's not a good thing. So they say that we had the technology of a pocket calculator in 1969 when they went to the moon. They didn't go to the moon, but when they pretended to go to the moon, the technology they had was the equivalent of a pocket calculator, and probably not a scientific one, just a bog standard 1 + 1 = oh yes, 2. So you see how much nonsense it all is, but no, they've been much further, haven't they? Now they've more or less toured the whole solar system. They know what Neptune is made of. They know what's under the gas of Neptune. Dearie me, it's just a blue light, obviously the blue light, but it isn't a ball of gas with I don't know what they said it's in the middle of it, but sake, that is just preposterous. Come on. And when they got to Pluto and photographed that, guess what? Pluto, the Walt Disney character, was there to meet them. Woof woof. I do feel like crying sometimes because people just lap it up. I despair. I despair. But I hang on to what I know is the truth, and that gets me through. And whether people take any notice of me and the truth, other people are telling the truth also. It's not just me, of course. There's a growing number of people who are sick of the horse shit that we've fed, and they're now speaking out about it. I never thought I would do anything like this. This to me is very unlikely. Anyway, if you know me, you know I'm not much of a talker, not much of a public speaker, and well, I just feel like I say it's an obligation. I mean to be a preacher and in the pulpit stand and point the way to heaven with a Bible in me hand, but I'm pointing the way to the truth. If you're ignorant of the truth, then you will live your life in the realms of fantasy, and you let Walt Disney control your whole mind. Because Jack Parsons, Walt Disney, Aleister Crowley, the big fans of Aleister Crowley, of course. Now, of course, he wasn't necessarily. He wasn't necessarily a bad person, Aleister Crowley. He was just into the occult things that that it's not anti spiritual either. It's not. It's occult just means hidden, of course, but the hidden mystics, the magic and illusions. That's what it is. So Walt Disney and Jack Parsons were trained or took a great deal of knowledge and advice from Aleister Crowley and other sources, of course, to use the techniques, smoke and mirrors, and hoodwink the general public. And what a good job they've done of it. They haven't got everybody, of course. When they actually pretended to land on the moon in 1969, a great many of the older people wouldn't accept it, didn't believe it, and said it was just nonsense. That's because their life, certainly their early life, hadn't had the bombardment of the programming that we have had, because the communications weren't as widespread, and they didn't have TV, that's for sure. They had radio, but even the older ones wouldn't have had radio either to begin with. The crystal sets didn't come in till I don't know exactly, but I know that my grandparents didn't have them until the 50s. And television came in the 50s, but my grandparents didn't have the television until the 60s. And then it was, of course, only black and white. That's how I saw many of my first episodes of Star Trek, in black and white. And and people think that's the future. They really do think that's the future. We'll be beaming up, but there has been massive advances in technology since 1969, of course. But the major advances have been communication, and that's all. We have fiber optics, which is a massive step. We now have communications masts all over the plane, just through everywhere. It's bristling with them, and that's because they are relaying the mobile phone signals. And fiber optics means that you can speak to people through Skype or other means across continents, which is, come on, let's face it, that's fantastic. It's brilliant. Can't you just be happy with that instead of making all this other bullshit up? Flying into space, which, for a start, there is no vacuum of space. Two, we couldn't move around in it because you can't propel yourself in a vacuum. Hey, can't you get that into your minds? So it's a complete non-starter. Even if the vacuum of space did exist, we couldn't go anywhere in it anyway without a big elastic band if you wanted to get back. So the elastic band, and then when you get to the end of it, stretch and then come back again. I wouldn't like to watch the landing, but splat. But that's about all we could do. Now, yes, okay, parachutes and stuff, yeah, that's great because there is a resistance when in our atmosphere plane. And like Frank Zappa and many people have said, the mind is like a parachute. If it's not open, it's no use. It's not working. In other words, it's not working. You know, I really messed that quote up, didn't I? But you got the picture. You got the idea. I just made myself a nice cup of tea. Oh, I don't have to murder anybody today for that. I'm not a murderer. So, yes, the moon. It's an enigma, and it's great that it is. I mean, wouldn't we all like to know? Wouldn't we all like to know everything? Of course we would. But the air of mystery about many things in life is what keeps your interest. If we knew everything, and scientists, of course, do, so they tell us, you know, they think they tell you that there's nothing else to discover, and he asks more questions than he answers. They will often say that, but it's bullshit. Like astrophysicists, they don't really do anything apart from think. And astrophysicists are, I mean, it's the biggest profession for what I call busy work. There's a lot of people do busy work where there's absolutely no point in it really. It's just to keep the unemployment figures down. Like the unemployment figures at the moment, you know, if you believe them, which of course I don't, but if you do believe them, and there is a little bit of truth in them, there aren't too many people signing on, but they're getting other benefits, and we call them employed. So they're either working through agencies or they're on zero contract. Both count as employment. But you may be sitting at home waiting for the telephone call. You're not employed then, are you? You're not earning money then. There is no retainer paid for these people. And busy work. I'm talking about bureaucracy. Nonsense. Red tape bullshit. Look, I'm not saying all architects are pointless, of course not. But a decent builder could just have the outlined plan of the house and doesn't need the detail. The detail often is a very expensive process to draw, and usually gets altered anyway, and such things often fail. Like a certain retaining wall that I remember building to specifications, and arriving a few months later on the same job, building a house. And we had to put the retaining wall up first because it was kind of in the way. If we didn't, the house would be in the way. And arrived one morning, and it was all of it, the full length was lying flat, and that must have been something like 60 foot of wall, and it just hadn't. The architect hadn't drawn it properly. He hadn't done a good job. We had to then improvise, and it's still up now, 20 odd years later. Goodbye.